Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Linda Tilson, and I am an empowerment coach, owner of Learn from Linda, entrepreneur, and International Men's Day USA ambassador. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of us seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide services to help, support, and overcome men and boys' life challenges. We are part of International Men's Day, and they have been serving for over 21 years, and 90 countries around the world join together and are doing various activities regularly. IMD follows 6 pillars, which is the overall well being of boys and men, and we follow in the same footsteps. So, why open up? Because men do not open their hearts and are often unwilling to share their matters with just anyone. When we keep their emotional challenges within ourselves and for a long time, at some point we will explode and it will affect our health conditions in many ways. That is why we want to create an open space and allow an individual to share their life journey through our platform. We aim to create awareness about the life challenges, struggles, and how to navigate and overcome the ups and downs that our boys and men go through in their lives. There are no limitations with gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups in sharing your life journey. In fact, all walks of life can participate. Our goal is to maintain a positive impact on someone's life through this program. Open Up is on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We bring an individual to each show and invite them to share their life experiences with you. So before I introduce our special guest for today, I would like to go through our disclaimer. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith toward peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not necessarily represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend that you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. So right now I would like to speak to our today's speaker, Brad Moser. He is a registered psychologist practicing at Associates Counseling Services in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. He is the host of the podcast Real Dads with Brad Moser, available on Spotify and Anchor. Real Dads is a self-help program for all dads, moms, and parents. It focuses on the importance of parental engagement, particularly father engagement, in the healthy development of kids. Since 2007, he has been providing individual couples and family counseling with children, teens, and adults. His areas of practice include anger, anxiety, bereavement, childhood and family of origin concerns, depression, identity concerns, marital relationship issues, men's and dads issues, parenting, self-esteem, separation and divorce, stress, suicidal ideation, and trauma. So join me in welcoming Brad Moser to Open Up.
Good morning.
Good morning. And so we're very happy and excited to have you here this morning, Brad. And we're going to jump right into the conversation right out of the gate. And I want you to start with what were some of the incidents that happened in your childhood that influenced or inspired you into what you're doing today as a professional psychologist?
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, and thank you for Savam and Voice of Men 360. This is a wonderful opportunity. And I just want to start by acknowledging that. And this is a great platform, and this is fantastic. This is one of the biggest areas I work with is boys, men, dads, parents. And so I love this opportunity. I think this is a great venue. So to open up about my experience, I first want to talk about some of the kind of the challenges that I faced growing up. So I grew up in the 90s in a small conservative city. And I felt a lot of disconnection, and I felt disconnected from others and from society's norms of masculinity and within myself. So in this city that I grew up in, there is very rigid expectations for masculinity. Things have gotten a little bit better overall in society since the 90s, but we still have those kind of same patterns that we could see nowadays. And the rigid expectations for masculinity is what I call, and you probably heard a lot about this within today's rhetoric, but it's the man box. And the man box sets out rules for acting like a man. These are the thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, emotions that boys and men are expected to conform to. And I was exposed to this growing up as a child, as a preteen, and in my teen years. And I felt like I was supposed to subscribe to these beliefs, these attitudes. So these are things like playing hockey, drinking beer, working on the rigs, working in the trades or other manly jobs, being socially dominant, competitive, like having the biggest muscles, having the most money, having the nicest car, the hottest girlfriend. A lot of different expectations that we're supposed to live up to. There's also ones like misogyny, which is prejudice against women, like treating women as if they're inferior. There's this ideology of disconnection, of being intolerant, of having attitudes towards others that are discriminatory, like homophobia, transphobia. The idea of being vulnerable or having any weakness was not okay. The only emotions that were okay to express were anger and numbness. So there's a lot that I had growing up, and this is very difficult. I found myself to live up to these expectations. There's another thing you might have heard of called toxic masculinity, and that's the idea that these by boys and men trying to live into this man box can be at risk of harming themselves or society through discrimination, violence, and sexual assault. And that's kind of a big fear and a big risk of this man box. And so for me, I didn't feel like I fit into this man box. I was extremely shy. I was disconnected. I tried to fit in the box because that was what I felt I was expected to do, but it didn't fit for me because I liked things that were outside the box. I liked poetry. I liked the sound of music. Like I liked being myself, but I couldn't fit that, and that was really difficult. And whenever you don't fit in the box, then especially in the 90s when I grew up, I was called gay. I was called other homophobic slurs. I was called woman. I was called the derogatory slang word for vagina. And that felt really hard because those things were seen as bad. Those things were seen as inferior at that time. So what I did is I tried to play the role. I tried to be in the man box, and it wasn't working. And inside, I knew it didn't feel right. I didn't fit in. And so as a teenager, particularly, was when it was really difficult for me because I experienced stress. I experienced anxiety, depression. I even experienced some suicidal thoughts as well. And the worst part about this is I didn't tell anyone. I didn't open up to anybody. I didn't know how. I didn't know that was okay to talk about your feelings or didn't know much about feelings to begin with. Now I know now that looking back, I know that my parents were supportive, my brothers, my friends, that if I was to open up, that they would be supportive and they would listen. But at that time I was struggling and I didn't know what to do with those feelings. And there was this absolute fear that I had of feeling and expressing these feelings. And so because of that, I kept those feelings to myself. And back then, and now I work in the mental health field, so I know that there's a lot less stigma for reaching out and seeing a counselor and talking about how you feel. But back then, that was a scary thing, right? I thought that, if you had to go to therapy, that was like a sign that you're crazy or that. And so, yeah, I kept all those feelings to myself. And so that was kind of the darkest point for me in my teenage years.
I want to acknowledge you, Brad, for everything that you've just shared. It's really important for men and boys, anyone, to understand that going and receiving therapy opening up and talking to people that you can trust is really important. But what you had said about trying to fit into a box that society says you should fit into, and then feeling like that wasn't for you, it felt awkward, it felt wrong, it didn't feel you, and to step outside of that view and really decide to become who you are and show up in the way that feels good for you. I can't applaud that message enough, because anytime anyone tries to fall into doing what society said you should do, what the rules are, and that nothing else can be accepted, well, then we're all walking around on eggshells. We're
Yeah.
not being who we are. And that is painful. That doesn't feel good. And so thank you very much for putting that out there. You've got at my heartstrings for saying that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So now I'd like to move our conversation to what your memories are of your father and your father and son relationship. And maybe you might even want to talk to you about whether or not your how your father played into that societal role that you were trying to fit into. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I have a very special relationship with my dad, and particularly now that I'm a dad, I see the value in his role in inspiring me to live up to certain values that I still follow in my life, and that's things like integrity and hard work and commitment and follow through and the importance of relationships and family and stuff like that. And we had a lot of fun memories, my dad and I, growing up, like with playing video games together, and with my brothers as well, like playing floor hockey and stuff like that. And those values, the importance of playing with kids, I think, is really important to me, and that's what I do a lot with my kids. And that's what I ask them now. That's what they appreciate about me the most, is that I'm playful with them. So that was really significant. And with my dad, I think you were asking about the man box. I think that was kind of the society we lived in at that time, and everybody was kind of. It seemed like, in my perception growing up, that everybody was going towards that, whether it was media, TV and movies, whether it was teachers at school and other adults, and my dad as well. But at the same time, I appreciate the love and support that my dad provided for me, particularly times that were difficult for me. Like I remember going to a high school dance once, and I was really scared. I was shy. I didn't know what to say or what to do, and he was very supportive. He dropped me off, and then when I was ready to go, he would pick me up and stuff, without question. And so, yeah, I appreciate that, and I've found that what I've learned from him growing up is how I am as a dad, and I appreciate a lot what I learned from him.
Thank you for sharing
Mm-hmm.
that. I think that's really nice that you had that support from your father. And
Mm-hmm.
I can picture that scenario there. I've got two sons, and they're going to dances, they're dating, they're
Mm-hmm.
doing these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so, trying to be supportive wherever we can. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
So I did want to mention one thing, if that's okay. Going back
oh,
to,
please.
yeah, that dark place that I was at. There was one person specifically that was really uh, helpful in my experience, and that was a teacher that I had. And this is, I remember I mentioned about those, being in that dark place as a teenager. There was a course that I took in grade 11. It's called, it's like a health class for high school. It's basically called Career and Life Management in Alberta and Canada, CALM. And my teacher for that was really good. Her name was Mrs. Spencer, and she taught the class like group therapy. So basically, the students sat in a circle, and we talked about the importance of confidentiality, respecting each other, like kind of the group norms, being non-judgmental, stuff like that. And all the topics we talked about, whether it was drinking, or whether it was practicing sex positive, or birth control, stuff like that. Like we would talk about those things and how they affect us, and we kind of ended up sharing our deepest, darkest secrets. It was really cool, and that really got me interested in counseling and in psychology. But it also helped me experience things that I wasn't getting from that man box. So things like that it's okay to have and talk about feelings. It's important to respect others and myself. So she would call out Mrs. Spencer would call out any kind of, toxic masculinity or man box behaviors that were hurtful towards others. Like she would call out put downs whenever anybody put down somebody else. I also learned the importance of being myself, the importance of boundary setting, saying things like I feel statements, the importance of relationships and supports. And that really, like I said, inspired me to pursue a career in counseling and psychology, and which led to me, from the dark place that I've been in, have a passion for working with boys and men from the struggles that I faced, and working with boys and men with similar struggles, like with direction and identity and authenticity, acceptance, connection. And then later on, led to my passion of working with dads.
Would you say that a large part of your practice is working with the dads then specifically, or do you work a lot with the younger teens?
Yeah, I work with all kinds, and that's a really good thing about my job. I do, like you were mentioning at the beginning, I do couples and family and individual counseling. I work with people, from age 7 and up. So it's a really nice that I have a nice spread there. But particularly, I guess what I'm really gravitating towards is working with men, with dads. And particularly with that age group, like, because now I am a dad, right? And I've been dad for a while now. My kids are 11 and 6. But I mentioned those struggles that a lot of men face with. They seem to become magnified when we have our own kids, right? And I think a lot of parents can speak to that as well, is that, in order to be a human and be the best human you can for your little humans, you want to be that inspiration and that support for them, right? And we have to be strong ourselves. And particularly with dads, what I found interesting is that we become a dad, we enter an arena where traditionally dads haven't been involved as much as moms, and haven't been accepted and celebrated as much as moms. And so that's something that I really try to promote in my work as a counselor, but also in my podcast.
I really love that. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking about that as you're talking about it. Just, my husband in the role that he plays as a dad. And you're right. You want to have a space and a place that you celebrate for
Mhm.
when he steps up and does really great things, and to acknowledge that, because when you can acknowledge that, then the person does more of that. And so
Mhm.
then, you know, our kids are always like watching to see, how do mom and dad,
Mhm.
navigate through life? How do they handle
Mhm.
crisis? How do they handle challenges, conflict, and how do they celebrate each other? And so
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I think it's a real positive thing that we
Mhm.
make that acknowledgement and do it more often. And so I'll
Mhm.
commit to that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to move now to what you think are the challenges that our men face today. What do you
Mm.
think are some things at the top?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of things, and men. Men. We face a whole spectrum, right? There's a lot of things that we go through, but overall, what I find in my practice, particularly for those men who didn't, grow up with a dad, right, or grow up with a positive male role model in their life, is just feeling like they don't have that positive male role model. So it's hard to learn maybe how to be a man, and how to be have healthy masculinity and not toxic masculinity, um, and that can be very difficult. But there can be a lot of positive role models out there that you can draw on, whether it's teachers or coaches or people in church and stuff like that. Another one is that a lot of men face with is emotional awareness and expression. Right, I kind of mentioned that with the man box. Is we're as men growing up, we're not taught how to do that. It's getting better nowadays, and I'm grateful to see that things like school are talking more about that and whatnot, and in society overall, we're talking about more about the importance of emotional awareness and expression. But that can still be a struggle that men face. Um, Another one is mental health, right? Of not being aware of it, not knowing how to deal with it until it becomes a really big problem. So things like depression and anxiety, and also how to deal with relationship conflict. That's something that a lot of times we don't learn about in school, or we forget, right? How to deal with disagreements and fights and whatnot with our spouses, our partners. And also a big one that I notice a lot with men is the challenges with work-life balance, right? Because there are a lot of dads and men out there who work really crazy hours and work out of town for a long period of time, right? How to balance that, but also just how to balance work and life, especially if we feel like we feel that pull to work harder and to make more money for our family. But at the same time, that takes away from the time with the family when we're working. Um, and then, of course, for men who are, outside of they're, either different, a member of different diversity, like their racial diversity, cultural, they're a part of the LGBTQ minority, is they can face discrimination, and some of them face discrimination every day, right? So how to cope with that as well. And something that I'm kind of passionate about, and it took me a while to get there, and it's, as a white man, understanding privilege is very important, right? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of men still nowadays, and I was guilty of this many years ago, and that's misunderstanding and misusing privilege, right? Privilege is basically the special advantage or immunity that's given to a group of people based on their skin color or gender, right? And it's important for white men particularly, and I can speak to this, to be aware of that, because I'm white and because I'm male, I may not have the same experiences that other people. I don't know particularly what it's like to be treated differently because of my skin color or because of my gender, right? And so there's a responsibility that comes with that, I feel, that we need to learn about diversity and the effects of discrimination on others, to accept others and to advocate for fairness.
I agree with everything you just said there. You said so many great, wonderful things, and thank you for hitting upon the white privilege, because that's something that has come up recently, and so I think there's more work to do, but we definitely got to start in that direction. Um, right now, I'm wondering, or if you wouldn't mind sharing one or two incidents that you can remember which affected an individual, a family, or others, and how they overcame those incidents. There's something that you feel would be advantageous for our audience to really think about and to take in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. And, I mentioned one of my specializations as a therapist is men. And so I can I can run by the typical case, because I've seen this so often that I can kind of give you a snapshot of what the typical case looks like, and kind of the typical steps that these men can go on to get over this. And so mainly what I see a lot of is where I'm working with a man, and at first he feels very disconnected from his life, his kids, his spouse, his job, his interests, and he feels stuck in that disconnection and the depression, right? And so they often will sign up for therapy because, their spouse expresses concerns that they need to take care of themselves, or something's wrong with them, or their boss, or they're starting to see how their mental health is affecting others or their job, right? And so when I start to work with them, this is kind of, it's every individual and every man is different, and men are more complicated than maybe society and media shows them to be. Like, we are very complicated individuals, just like women and just like every other person. But the typical steps I find is that usually working with this individual, this typical case, is that usually the first step is to help this individual find their identity, right? Because that's often lost along the way, right? So who they are, what they stand for, their past, their future, the legacy that they built and stuff like that, is to find that identity. And then also to explore personal values. I find that very important, right? And when finding those values, and usually I try to look at like a top 5 values that they have, is starting to move towards those values, right? So I'd say one of the top values is integrity, right? So what is one thing that they can do each week to kind of move towards that value? And then after that is really learning how to reconnect with the people in their life, right? Their kids, their spouse, their friends, and then to establish a circle of supports, right? So have these people in their life that they can draw on. And particularly this can include other men. That's very valuable to be able to reach out and be vulnerable with other men. That's a really good step in getting through that man box. And when learning how to be vulnerable, and this can be with all people in our life, particularly our spouse, our kids, our friends, is to be aware of and express our emotions, right? And then to also ask for help. And that's so important. And that can be from the people in our social supports, but it can also be from looking for help from other people like therapists and doctors and other professionals who can help us. And then the other thing is to help others, right? Is to help others with certain things, like helping them fix something, or to if they need somebody to talk to, that kind of thing, right? So it's kind of what I see as happens is the typical process.
Oh, I love what you have shared there. Helping people to step into what they value. I think that's really huge when you're trying to figure out what your
Mm-hmm.
identity is and what you want in
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Mm-hmm.
and I honestly feel that you hit upon another good point, and that's when you
Mm-hmm.
can, help yourself by, asking for help, but then you can also turn to your fellow man, and you can help them with something, because when you have that
Mm-hmm.
back and forth exchange of
Mm-hmm.
helping yourself, so somebody sees that and then you help somebody else, well then
Mm-hmm.
you can't help another person and not actually help yourself at the same time. I think the two go hand in hand, and
Mm-hmm.
the more we work with each other in society to establish that behavior and step into it and replicate it, the easier it becomes. It doesn't become this
Mm-hmm.
awkward thing that seems hard to do. It becomes this thing that's the normal way of living, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly that's the healthy way to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this takes us right to our next question, the segue here. And so, what are some of the simple steps that we, as an individual, a friend, family, and society, can do to help men? What are some other things that we haven't mentioned yet?
Absolutely. I was mentioning, the bit about toxic masculinity, and some of those traits that fall within the man box. I like to look at it instead of the toxic masculinity, moving towards healthy masculinity, and that it is completely okay it's good to be a strong leader. It's good to be competitive once in a while. It's okay to be stoic, but we also want to try to lean towards vulnerability, connection, acceptance, and authenticity. So healthy masculinity looks like being able to move towards acceptance, right? Towards feeling and expressing feelings, um, towards having, people in our life that are important, including female friends and mentors, and male friends and mentors. Um, and also the importance of authenticity, feeling comfortable being yourself, not feeling pressure to fit in any kind of box. Also feeling empowered, which empowerment is having power over yourself, not power over others. To be connected with other men, and rather than be competitive with men, to be more in a connection role with men, and also be a leader, helping, teaching, guiding others, learning from others as well, and knowing that everybody you meet, you can definitely learn a lot from them. Being able to ask for help and to seek help when you need it, right? I mentioned that the importance of seeking out help from psychologists, therapists, other professions, other helping people to help you out, and to open up, the importance of opening up, and to accept diversity and to focus on inclusion rather than exclusion. So that's kind of what I've encouraged for men out there to focus on that healthy masculinity. And then when it comes to all of us, right, just being able to try to let go of gender norms, to accept and promote the acceptance of diversity, to allow men to express whatever they're feeling in a wide range of emotions, and particularly with dads, that to promote the importance of father engagement, and yeah, that's kind of what I would have to mention there with that.
Thank you for mentioning all of those great points. I want to do something to highlight you at this point. And so I want to leave everyone with a message from you. I want you to speak to why you started your podcast, when
Mm.
you host it, and what type of guests typically watch your show and what they have to benefit from coming in and listening to your show.
Absolutely. And then when I was mentioning earlier about my work, my passion work with dads and with men, that really ties into my podcast. It's a monthly podcast. It's available on Spotify, and it's called Real Dads with Brad Moser. And my passion and experience being a dad and working with dads has fallen out into this podcast. And so the podcast is an educational program for dads and moms where we can learn how to grow as parents and authentically connect with our kids. So there are going to be a few. I just started this podcast in September. Before that, since 2019, I was hosting a radio show it was first called Super Dads, and then it turned into Real Dads. And some episodes I'll be talking myself, and most episodes I'll have a guest on this show. And the guests the topics of the episodes are related to all different areas that we as dads and as parents, how we can be the best parent we can be. So we're looking at things like my guest this month in January, near the end of January, will be talking about grief and loss and how to go through that ourselves as people, but also to be able to support our kids through the process of grief and loss. I'm going to have guests to talk about, ADHD and how that can affect us as parents and our kids, and trauma. There's going to be a lot of different areas that we're going to cover. It's going to basically everything and anything that can affect parents and families and children, and how we as the parents and the dads can support our kids and be the best kind of parents we can be for our children.
And one last question here. Could you share what does it mean to you to open up as a man, and why is it important when it comes to men's issues? Let's wrap this all together to end this off today.
Absolutely. So I started the show today talking about my dark place as a child, as a teenager, because of that man box that I felt I was in, and that's why it's so important to open up. We need to, as men, to open up, talk about our concerns, talk about our feelings, talk about what we struggle with other men, with people in our lives, our social supports. With professionals if we need to as well, because we need to break the stigma that men don't ask for help, or men don't talk about feelings. We need to, like I mentioned before, break down the gender roles of masculine and feminine, and make it so that all people, all genders, all sexual orientations, gender identities, that we can reach out to others and we can support others, and that's okay, and to make that an okay place and a good place for all of us to feel good about ourselves and to promote practice positive mental health.
Yes, all of those things so we can practice positive mental health. I'd love to thank you for joining us and sharing your life journey today. I think it opens up a place and a space where more men and boys can come and be their authentic self. You shared today what that looks like and why a person would want to do that more than anything else.
Yeah, thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you, Savam, and thank you for Voice of Men 360.
Thank you. I'm going to move to our ending announcements. And so I want to share that the Voice of Men 360, there are no limitations to gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. And if you want to be a guest on our show and are willing to be a part of our organization and help us directly or indirectly, please reach out to us. We love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, community organizations, associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. And so our phone number is 437-889-8329, or you can email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. Or you can also visit our website, www.voiceofmen360.org. And last but not least, you can find us on all of the different social media channels. We want you to join our Facebook group and our page. And we want you to do that so you can see the daily activities. And we want you to invite your friends as well. Our other platforms include Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. We want to reach out to as many people to be able to support them. And we thank you for continuing to support our community and doing this much needed work. Thank you.